And welcome everybody to the virtual cuppa. So I hope you've got a cup of tea or something to share. Fantastic.
It's not a cocktail.
It looks like a great cocktail. I'm Alison Creed. I'm your host of the virtual cuppa, and I work in the Arts Teaching Innovation team, which is part of the Faculty of Arts at the University of Melbourne. And I'm a curriculum designer, but I'm also an organisational coach. So I kind of put both hats on coming into the virtual cuppa. And just in case you don't know, or just coming and watch the recording or dropping in, the virtual cuppa runs from Monday to Thursday from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. And while I am usually joined by my ever sunny disposition co-host, which is Dr. Max Schmitz. Max is at a webinar overnight for 2 nights in London virtually, and the very kind Derick Lyle, who some of you will have met yesterday, who's from the Faculty of Business and Economics, and Derick is a teaching fellow, has stepped in to co-host for Wednesday and Thursday. Now, the other thing, who's got a beautiful green background sitting here.
Well, you're wearing green shirts, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like I didn't have a green shirt, so this is the closest.
Didn't you get the memo this morning?
Green is not normally my colour for wearing, because I do a lot of green screen work. Wearing a green top was never.
You would be just this floating disembodied head.
Well, I actually bought
Your
this.
Students might actually pay more attention.
I never wore it until I did this and thought, actually, this is quite good against the background. You stand out. So I'm wearing my green screen. So this is Dr. Amanda White. I'm going to, if my screen share works again today, pop up here. And Derick can give me a thumbs up when you'll notice, Derick, I cleaned up my desktop.
Yeah, you're halfway there.
So, special guest today is Dr. Amanda White, and she is acting Deputy Head of Students and Subjects, and she's also a senior lecturer in accounting and in the accounting discipline group at the University of Technology, Sydney. Update me if I'm wrong. I'm grabbing all this from your LinkedIn and your university profile. And Amanda is education focused as an academic in the business school at UTS, and her interests really are team-based learning. So everything about engagement and interaction with students, so that collaborative learning space, and academic integrity, which is what we're going to be mainly focusing on today. But hopefully we're going to get a couple of tips from Amanda's other hat, which is called Amanda Loves to Audit on YouTube, which are fantastic and free to access. And this is all about student learning, student engagement, and open access for them. But I should also say Amanda has an industry background as well, as do I, and as does Derick. And Amanda has previously held positions at Cuppa and Lyle, and later on as a senior consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I've run that all into one big thing, haven't I? I wonder whether
that's exactly the.
Is it? Oh, okay. I like that.
It was one big long joining.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop screen sharing, come back to you, and I'll just check in first, even though there's no one else here with us today. How are you both in this crazy world as academics, teachers in higher education during the COVID crisis? Amanda, how are you going?
I'm hanging on. I think it hasn't been as stressful for me. So last year I already made a decision to fully flip my class, to actually move my entire subject into Microsoft Teams. So we have an LMS presence that's just a really basic sort of set of information of where to find us, some basics, but otherwise everything else in my subject sits in Teams. All the comms, student discussion, our notes. So the shift for me to move to the workshop part of my subject online was a little bit tricky, because we'd built all these fantastic collaborative activities for a physical space, and students moving around rooms and special guests and a whole range of different things. But when it came to moving that online, that was probably the only real difference. But my tutors and my teaching assistants have been great. So for me, I guess the biggest stress point is supporting others. So as somebody who was leading the charge in technology, that then automatically also meant I was the Zoom coach, the learning management system coach, the how do I make my content into recorded content coach, which has been interesting, but it's sort of starting to settle down. And the other big challenge, I guess, is supervising distance learning, of which my 7-year-old is currently climbing around my office. Honey, what do you need? Oh, he's doing a maths task where they've asked him to measure rooms in his house based on the size of his feet. So that's what he's currently doing. So it's that also it's being able to pivot from doing one thing for 10 minutes and then having to supervise some home, not technically homeschooling, but school at home.
Yeah.
There's no long blocks of time until my children go to sleep. So it's really trying to figure out between my husband and I, when can I be here in my studio to record stuff? When does he need to use my studio for his web meetings, school things, kids who are hungry like I don't know how he survives at school because I only send like 4 bits of food, yet I swear he eats 3 times that much at home. So
there's a fridge at home
sure
and
is,
a book.
Oh,
you
I
sure
know,
is
but
not the playground bully who's shaking down the other kids for their lunches?
I think it's more that like when they're with their friends, they just don't remember to eat. But I
Yeah.
think it's like adults when you get bored. He's like, "Oh, I'm bored. I'm hungry."
Mm.
Yep, sounds
So,
like my
yeah.
cat.
Yeah, but my littlest one, daycare centres are still open in New South Wales,
Mhm.
and it's still very expensive. So my choices were I could actually get work done during the day and send him, and they're taking lots of precautions, and the government still says it's safe, or not send him but still pay the $600 a week and then exhaust myself for a longer period of time. And I think it's coming, but right now I'm just working as much as I can to do as much ahead of time
Mhm.
until that time comes when daycares do close, and then it'll be a totally different type of normal.
A staggered type of normal, at least, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
lucky I'm not in an apartment. I have a huge backyard. My kids can still run around. There's no going to the park now, but it's it's a challenge, but we're getting there, and it's about, we've talked about building resilience and building our ability to be adaptable and to pivot, for all of us, not just me, but for my 7-year-old, for my husband. Our dog, she's just like, "Oh, what are you doing at home all day, people?"
You're invading my doggy space.
Yeah.
What about you, Derick?
Doing all right. I was no stranger to working from home and some sort of light e-learning content. So pivoting to online has not been that much of a technical challenge for me. Having my partner also working from home. Yeah, working from home when you're by yourself versus there's 2 of you. And we don't have a tiny apartment, but it's no huge mansion either. And I'm trying to record something, but she's on a conference call, and we all speak louder and yell at the screen when we're on conference calls because we want to be sure people can hear us. And I'm like, yeah, I can hear you laughing in my recording. I have to do it again now.
No,
And so
leave it in
just
there. Totally leave it in there.
I got last night I was finishing up, and I've also discovered that I got this squeaky chair. As I move around, it squeaks. And some of those squeaks, when I'm listening it back, they sound awfully suspicious. So I'm like, okay, I got to take a couple of them out. But in the thing I said, yeah, I'm sorry, I apologize for my very squeaky chair, just to, cover. But
I think there's
yeah,
got to be some reality though as well.
as they say, all the freckles and the warts and all, just put it out there. Anyways, I mean, we're figuring out a protocol here in the office. We have a second workstation set up at the dining room table. So yeah, just sort of managing that space, figuring it out. Yeah, sitting on top of each other. I saw yesterday someone posted on Facebook a lot of Twitter posts that were just hysterical, and that it's all these spouses are discovering the work persona of their mates, right?
I've seen that one. That's hilarious.
Right, and so you've got stuff like, oh, I just discovered that I'm married to a let's circle back guy. Who would have known, And so listening to all the meeting banter and how they interact with their colleagues and in meetings and buzzwords. And the one lady, she said, yeah, so my husband's in sales and I hear him repeatedly saying, so, what can I do to make your day better today? Why, how come he never asks me that,
Yep.
So everybody's learning a lot more about other people and their professional personas, and some of that's very amusing as it is, but is also very disconnected in this. Who is this person? This person is something very different than, at home, and for better or worse, sort of. Oh, I'm grateful that I got the good one, right? And the colleagues have to deal with the bad one. But there's a lot of people who are also like, he's patient and he's kind in meetings. Like, how come I never get that,
Yes, well, I'm on one of these prior recordings. I think it was last week. Maybe it was week 1. Everything's kind of drifting out there. So I've worked from home, from offices, from all around the world as well, at different universities. So I've delivered classes from Amsterdam into Australia at different times of the night, so it gets here in the morning and all those fun things. And a lot of these things, my who's now a young adult, but was kind of teenage years doing all these things alongside me. So we've kind of always worked around together. But doing, I had never done a YouTube type of, recorded a video. I mean, I'd done all the Zoom things for students and I'd done recorded drop-ins and all bits like this, but I wanted to do a little trailer, trying to keep it to a minute. And he gave me some, because he's done this since a kid, he used to do YouTube stuff all about whatever he was gaming on and stuff. Anyway, so he's the expert, and then as you do, you should listen to the expert at least a bit to get some tips. And so the key thing was, he said, right, I'm all set up and I'd Googled everything, I was fine. And he said, just do, say, 3 recordings and then have a break and go and have a cup of tea, because then you're going to come back and you're going to cut all this stuff out because it's not going to fit in 2 minutes. And so I did 6 recordings, still not bad, came out, cut all this stuff out. And he said, how you going? And I said, yep, no, going back in, do this again. And I'd done about 20 more. And he came in and he kind of walked in, he said, okay, it's time to stop, okay? And I went, look, one more. I've just got this one and it's fine. I've got it really. He goes, oh, okay. So he walked away and he came back 5 more later and went, you really have to stop, okay? They're not going to get any better. You can't do them perfectly. And the one that was, that you did 7 takes ago was great. Just leave it at that. And I'm like, no. And I'm like,
that's that perfectionism part of being an academic,
like,
right?
Really? And he's like, and I went, I'm doing this. Just leave me alone. I'm getting there. So about 10 more later, he came back and he said, you're hoarse and we can't even hear you. And I made a joke on the recording and just said, when your, kind spouse, partner, housemate comes across and tries to drag you away, don't bite them. Because I was literally at that stage. And later I came back and I said, I'm so sorry. That was really bad, Alison. I will listen. I will put some measures in place. And so, yes. So the next trailer, I've only done my second trailer, which was kind of a wrap up of the first 2 weeks. And I did 3. And then I walked away and I came back and I did this. And I still did too many more, but I still only probably did about 6 more, which was better than I actually did 30. He said, you did 36. This is insane. I went, okay, well,
that's
it was a
really common. Like when you give academics a long time to make video content, they keep going until it's perfect. And I think what this whole process of having to move to online delivery has taught everyone is that good enough is fine. Right? Yeah. I had my kids coming. My kids come into my 4 o'clock Friday afternoon class. everybody's like, where are they? Are they still at daycare? What's happening? Are they coming in to wave? Like, you just got to make it.
And I think it's that academic hat because you everything else gets reviewed. You either get your professional appraisal, you put a journal article in, it's being reviewed. You're so hypercritical of trying to get to that point. And it's like, it doesn't work in this environment at all.
And it
No.
takes practice. Like, I can sit down, I will probably spend 25 or 30 minutes filming a clip that will probably only end up being about 8 minutes long. That's for YouTube.
Yeah.
But in the early days, it took scripting and a long time to figure that out. And then as you get more experienced, speaking off the cuff, knowing how to look at the camera and engage with the audience, that all takes time to develop. And it's not something that you just turn on one day and suddenly it works. There's lots and lots of practice that goes into this.
Yeah,
All
the biggest challenge that I'm finding
Yeah.
with the sort of online recording is brevity. Sort of playing back and listening back. I'm like, yeah, dude, you're kind of long-winded. Get to the point faster.
Cut. I have an editing machine.
Yeah, because yesterday I thought, oh, okay, I've got these 2 practice problems that I wanted to just work through, right? And they were a little bit more complex. I knew that they would take a little bit more, right? But I'm like, okay, it's 10 minutes each max, right? It was 55 minutes. And so I'm listening back through and I'm like, okay, can I cut some things, chop this shorter, because just the intimidation factor, the students of another 50-minute video to watch from this guy, right? And a lot of it is relevant, but I realized how tangential I am teaching. So something occurs to me and then I'll go and discuss that for 5 minutes, and it's relevant to the course, but it just expands, this video. And my concern about that is it makes it hard to, okay, I come back and I want to review this. Where is the 3 minutes of actual content that the student needs to finish their assignment lost in all this other 45 minutes of tangents, right? And so that's a habit that I'm going to have to work on sort of developing in, make a side note of, there's an extra a tip or a topic here that's might be worth exploring. If you have time, do another video segment of it, but don't do that now, right? Stay on task. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to get us back on task now.
There you go.
Academic integrity. Over to you, Amanda.
Okay. Let me share my
So,
PowerPoints. We were having problems with this in my previous. Where is the right one? It's not even going to let me find.
No, mine doesn't either. So I'm on an Apple Mac, everyone, and it it doesn't do it. But what I've found now is if I just click on the screen that I'm currently on, this is with a Mac, I can then flick across to the correct, like the PowerPoint, and it works. So that's on a Mac.
Let's see. Okay.
There we go.
Can you see my slide? Yay!
That's
Excellent. All right. So I thought I better have some slides because, otherwise then I just get a little bit off track.
None of us academics will watch it if there's no slides. We need PowerPoint. Come on.
So I guess where I came into academic integrity, everybody has that crucible moment, that sort of piece or experience where you go like, oh, I'm going to do something about this, or this is too much and I'm overwhelmed and I'm just going to let academic integrity go by the wayside. So I had an experience back in 2017 in which 16% of my cohort cheated on a task, and that was 55 students. And I was given some options then. I said, look, to my deputy head at the time, I think I have an issue. And that person said, look, do you want to pursue it or do you just want to let it slide? Because this would be a lot of work. It's going to eat into your life. It's going to become this big, ginormous thing that has its life of its own. And in teaching auditing and teaching ethics, I thought, like, I can't let this go. So, students worked together. They colluded to write answers for a task where the correct answer was only worth 50% of the actual result. And The rest, the other 85%, were on communication skills. And when we talked to them, they said things like you see in the bubbles here, my tutor said it would be okay, or I didn't think the rules applied if it was a small assessment task, or the assignment guide didn't say not to get help from someone else, which I thought individual task would mean individual, or I didn't know academic integrity rules applied to speeches. So we found a huge disconnect between what we thought students should know about our rules and regulations and what they did know, because it turns out it's like Apple terms and conditions. You know, you download a new app, it throws up all these terms and conditions, and you just go next. Um, and so students didn't really have this understanding. And then I also link that back to, the fraud triangle, which comes out of criminology, which says people are more likely to engage in fraud where there's an opportunity, they feel pressure to, and they can rationalize conducting bad things away. And when it comes to academic integrity, like students have heaps of pressure from their parents. In the current COVID environment, we're going to see probably a huge cut in grad opportunities available. So trying to get a graduate job is going to be really difficult. There's lots of opportunities, especially in the current environment. Everybody's moving to take-home exams, online quiz assessments, other types of assessments which are more able to be cheated on. And then students have a lot of rationalizations. It only affects me. It doesn't affect anyone else. I'm not hurting anybody else directly. Or my friends did it. Or the university's not searching for issues around academic integrity, or they're not searching for breaches. So if they're not searching for it, it mustn't be important. Or the university doesn't talk about it very much. So therefore, it's not important. And so I wrote a piece for Campus Morning Mail, and Sally Kift asked me to write about anything. And at the time, I was going to write about open access content creation. But then we sort of moved into this COVID-19 remote learning, distance learning, online teaching delivery mode. And what really came up to me in I think a couple of weeks prior to this, I was in an event with Kath Ellis from the University of New South Wales and Guy Curtis from UWA. And we were talking about the risks in the times of COVID-19, and that there is so much risk. Like, I am 99, we've already seen advertisements of ways that students can cheat. Oh, you're studying your course remotely because of COVID-19 and your university's going distance. Well, we can help you. And it's cheaper if you buy earlier, like subscription model cheating. And so for a lot of students, they're far away from home. They're probably, a lot of students have decided to return to China and study there, where they're not communicating in English a lot. So that sort of ramps up the pressure. And so in my article in Campus Morning Mail, I talked about how one of the biggest things that stops students from cheating is their relationships with us. That we talk to them about cheating, that they feel like if they're cheating, they're cheating on me essentially as the academic. And that's really different when we're in a remote situation that, it's like the keyboard warrior. People might say a lot of things online that they wouldn't say face to face. Students might do a lot of things online that they might not normally do face to face with us. So building that relationship is really important. And then considering assessment design, I say consider assessment design to reduce opportunities to cheat, because you can't eliminate it. But still, students who really want to cheat are going to go down that road. But the other thing that's really important is discussing contract cheating with students. Yes, you can go buy your assignment. Yes, you can get a friend to help you. But that's not going to help you in the real world when you need to know this. And you also need to discuss what your institution is doing to really try and detect breaches, because we might be talking about, doing the right thing and academic integrity and explaining to students how to reference properly and how to acknowledge sources. But if we also don't tell them what we're doing to detect cheating and academic misconduct, then we might as well not be doing any of the education. Because if we're educating, but we're not checking to see if students are following the rules, then that just is like saying, oh, you can drive as fast as you like. Yes, there are speed limits, but there'll be no speed traps. And people will go, well, if no one's checking, I might as well sort of, take a different tack. So in this time, it's Yeah, it's really interesting in looking at what academics are doing, what students are talking about. In accounting, we have professional accreditation. We can't escape some form of invigilated assessment. But remotely invigilated exams bring up privacy concerns, whether you have internet, there's equity issues around that. Academic integrity in this age. And I think you've got Phil Dawson coming on later in the week. Phil's
Yeah, next week.
Phil's Phil's writing a book on technology related to catching contract cheating and academic integrity. And there's lots of things that we can do in terms of training our casual academics to detect it in marking, having facilities in place to say, oh, I'm a casual academic, I find an issue, there is someone I can hand that off to. I don't have to figure out all the investigation myself.
Mm.
And I think with the pressure on university budgets, I think some universities are putting the pressure to reduce their use of casuals, on subject coordinators to do more. I've seen instances in which casual academics are offered piece rates for marking. So it's not how long does it take you, it's 10 minutes per task or
Mm.
per piece. And if it takes more than that to investigate because you suspect cheating, then that's not an incentive for academics or casual academics especially to do the right thing. Everybody's under pressure. It's the pressure of remote distance supervision for your own children, caring for your family, plus all of this as well. I think it's certainly a time where we need to be really careful. People say, oh, look, I give them a take home exam. I only give them 1 day to do it. I'm like, I could find a contract cheating company to do that task for you in 4 hours. Like, it's not as simple as write something really authentic or give them a short turnaround. It becomes a real challenge. And I don't think we're talking about it a lot. Right now, we're all just worrying about getting online. The next step is, now that we're online, how do we encourage students to do the right thing, support them to do the right thing, and then also monitor whether they're actually doing that?
Yeah, it's interesting because so the field that I have more recently been researching into has been career and employability. And a lot of what you're talking about here in terms of your personal credibility, whether it be in a humanities area or business area, you're developing that, your profile, your identity and your credibility that you are then replicating to in front of a potential employer, to an interview panel and the job that you're actually going into. Now, if your resource is this is how you achieve what you want to, the goals you want to achieve, and academic integrity has not been one of those. So practicing those things are actually, they're what's going to be flagging you as the person that, yeah, we do want you. You've what you've done is very transparent in your identity right through your university into your future study. Yeah.
And that also comes down to motivations of students as well. There are different motivations for why students study certain degrees or certain areas. And if your motivation for studying a particular program isn't aligned with your career and employability in that area, I think that increases the potential for cheating, because you're like, oh, I'm doing it because my parents want me to get this piece of paper, or it's the fastest way to get to a particular outcome. That also increases the risk. And, it's even amongst medical students. I think there's a paper about, I'm fairly sure it's Ukrainian doctors, in which a majority of Ukrainian doctors admitted that they had cheated on exams at university and they didn't see a problem with it. So if you're going for medical treatment in the Ukraine, I'd be a little bit worried.
It's interesting too. So I've taught in Vietnam as well. And again, it's coming from those more, I suppose, and now it's a very broad term to say a collectivist culture into a more individualistic culture like Australia. But a lot of those students that I was teaching, this was master's students, there was not just them, but the ethos around education was lifting each other up. And part of that was being able to help everybody, because it costs so much for them to be doing, and there was such a big commitment, financial commitment from family or extended family, was we will all help each other achieve our potential. So those potentials were going to be different, but a lot of the time they would come together and they would collaborate. So I remember thinking, this is a really hard balance. If you move into an Australian or an American, for instance, higher education system, this is not going to be tolerated. This is going to bang, you're going to get with academic integrity. So I tried to balance things there where I did certain things so I did a flipped exam, and it was just a paper-based exam. I only had about 60 students in my class, and it was quite short. They basically came in, they individually did the exam. I actually found this works kind of really well also for students in Australia, where they get a bit with having to be group assessed and they want the individual. So they came in, they did the individual exam, and it was only, I think it was about 20 minutes, nothing too long. Then that was handed in, and then the flip was that they actually then went into pre-assigned groups, and they hadn't been given the answers. It was exactly the same exam, and they worked on that exam. So they actually, as a teaching and learning kind of experience, they were teaching each other, they were arguing, debating, working out the best that they could get. And then that was assessed. I assessed it at a lower than the individual one, but I had other kind of things, the group work, learning to kind of give you points of view. But that was one example of how I balanced it over there.
Yeah, and we do that actually every single week in my subject. Every single week, the first part of the class is 4 questions in an individual test, 10 minutes for the same 4 questions in a group test, and we use Zoom breakout rooms to make that happen. I don't use Teams because it doesn't have the ability to set up rooms in the same way. But it's really one of these things where, to get students to think about learning together, working together, studying together, and we're looking, I was really glad I didn't do it, but we had on our roadmap, my subject development roadmap, is to move my accounting exam to like the nurse's OSCE type exam. So observe them doing a clinical type of task, in which we would work with industry and academics. They would do a task for an hour, and then they would have a 10-minute interview with an audit firm partner to really check that they knew the task. And that was it's the perfect goal of where we want to get to, but I'm glad I didn't have to try and figure out how to do that online because some of the things like practicals and things with other areas, students who are studying physio or something, how am I going to do a physio practical for this particular subject? There's certainly lots of interesting things that I'm seeing come up on Twitter about lab work and practicals and how we make that work. But, a lot of universities are moving to remote invigilation, of which they say, look, it's really hard to cheat, like the AI algorithms that they use to track eye movements or head movements or whatever it is are really, really sophisticated. But, the market for cheating is also really, really sophisticated. I thought, look, surely through a webcam, I couldn't pretend to be someone else. And we were talking about this on Twitter, and then someone said, yeah, look, here's this program. You have to sit in front of your camera and talk to it for about 48 hours. But it will run intercepting your webcam, and then once it trains and it understands your face and your facial movements, you can set it to make you appear as anybody.
Wow.
In a deep fake. So those on YouTube, there's stuff where like they've put Nicolas Cage into every movie imaginable or something like that. But the fact that you could do that through a webcam, like, it's really the Wild West out there. And all we can do is educate, detect as much as we can, and then also, make sure that academics are doing that. A lot of academics I've come into contact with have said, it took 8 months for a case to go through our process. And in the end, nothing happened, or I couldn't get enough evidence, or it was a slap on the wrist. But, strong networks of staff working together towards this tends to be, one of the best things. If you've got someone in your faculty who does the interviewing of students, who knows the rules, can understand the penalties, really makes that whole process a lot easier. And my 55 cases, when I talk to people about individual cases, they go, "Oh, look, if you did 55, I can do one." So, when that happened, I did just have a really big glass of wine and half a block of chocolate because it was pretty soul destroying. And I could have either let it just destroy me, or the other side of that was I thought, okay, I want to do something about this. Let's move forward and try and make a difference. So, yeah, I use gamification at UTS to do that. It's a bit hard. It requires students to work face to face, and we haven't done that in this online environment. But, it's something.
Just a moment. Jenny, if you're there, can you just turn your video off just so we don't have someone younger on it? Just for sharing privacy for you. Ta. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so we use a board game normally to talk to students about academic integrity, and it's fun, and they work in teams, and it's open access as well. So if anybody's interested, I'll give Alison the link to post into Teams. But
this is something that's actually already been done at University of Melbourne and Faculty of Business and Economics. I have talked about it and attempted to kind of get some interest. Academic integrity doesn't seem
not sexy, really.
Yeah, but I think also different faculties have different recognition of whether it's happening or it's not happening. So in terms of actually getting this happening.
That's even country. There's even country differences. So that game's being used at a couple of other universities in Australia, including La Trobe and UniSA. But often when you talk in the US, especially, Canada seems to be quite aware of the problem.
Yeah.
But in the US, it doesn't seem to be something that they talk about a lot. It's not, we have an honor code. We have an honor code, and honor code is going to protect our students from cheating.
I think a lot depends on sort of the collective mindset, right? So if you've got this orientation towards prevent, detect, and punish, and so you say, well, we've got procedures in place. We make them sit in an exam room with an invigilator with pencils and paper. We've got it covered. This is we've done our bit to prevent, detect, and punish, right? But I think one of the things that you alluded to, Amanda, which is this shift in the mindset, is encourage, support, monitor, self-regulation. How do you create the students to be the type of citizens that we'd like them to be, right? Rather than the prisoner and the jailer, right? And so it's not only a question of getting the students to change their perspective, but I think you have to change the perspective of the academics as well, right?
And even in some professional associations, we see very, very low academic integrity and cheating rates in law students because they know they can't become registered as a solicitor, or it becomes much more difficult if they have breached academic integrity regulations because their application form to become a lawyer says you have to tick a declaration that you're a fit and proper person, and you have to declare any type of misconduct, including academic. And as far as I can see, we've done some surveys of other professional associations. That's not something that's included in a lot of other professional associations. And I said to my students, if you knew you couldn't register as an accountant if you'd been caught cheating, would that change oh my gosh, yeah, if I knew that this would have a real world impact on me, I might actually think about doing things the right way. And, it's hard.
With what you said that a while ago about that personal connection as well, that you said you're cheating against me. So I think that kind of emotional level as well of tapping into that it's not just, okay, I'll be penalised or this is going to count against me in the job market, but actually that I feel bad because I've done this. And essentially a lot of, even if we just go back to the plagiarism type of thing and it was my idea, that notion that we're respecting who's gone before us, we're acknowledging if you come up and you've done different things, you need the recognition, you need the acknowledgement, and we're thanking you for having given that. That is part of our our identity as academics, as researchers, but also as graduates from these institutions. So I like how you creating that emotional connection about, if you don't cite this, you're harming me, and you're harming you, but trying to bring in that thread. I think that little guilt bit, we're all burdened with guilt over so many things, and it sticks for a long time.
And it's also, I say to them, when you cheat and you get a certain result, then you're saying that, if you both get the same grade, you and somebody else sitting next to you, then what you're doing is you're devaluing somebody else's program, someone else's degree as well. And, we do try and talk about that employability. And the reason why students, I think, tend not to cheat in really obvious ways that I can't seem to catch in my subject is that, I tell them how important this is to me. I tell them this is the foundation of being a business professional is ethics. And just last week we talked about hand sanitizers and cost. And I think I saw somewhere 450 mils on sale at a chemist for $45, which is like, I think something like, 300 times the regular price. And so, if you're in that business, if you're the accountant, if you're the business professional, if you're the marketer, then what is ethical to do? And this comes back as well to the Royal Commission on Banking, right? Is this a failure in business schools to talk about ethics and to talk about what is the right thing to do versus what is the thing that gets you the most individual profit?
Hey, Jenny, welcome. Nice to see you dropping in.
Thank you.
Of academic integrity in your context, what's been your experience? What's your reality? And then what challenges have you faced?
I think my biggest challenge, I'm in history. So I hammer home the footnoting and the referencing, and if in doubt, footnote it. I don't care how many there are. But for me, I've had one case of very legitimate plagiarism that I had to pull the student up on. It basically was slabs of Wikipedia copied and pasted. But more challenging for me is working together. So when you're marking hundreds and hundreds of essays, and they're all on the same topic, you see similarities anyway, but every so often you get two that are almost exactly the same essay, and you think, oh, I've read this before. And there's enough slight differences that it's not a direct copy, and it's not just a paraphrase, but you can tell that those two students worked together to write the same essay, or one student copied off another student, all of that stuff. And, when I bring it up, there's no, I can't talk to the students about it. I'm not supposed to bring up plagiarism. Turnitin doesn't identify it as copying. But you read them in sequence and you go, these are the same damn essay, making the same arguments and the same points, using the same sources in the same order. There's no way they've done this independently. And that's the greatest challenge for me is as a casual, the lack of ability to look at this and say, there's a problem here. I'd love to talk to these students about, this is not acceptable. Don't do it again. But as a casual, even when I'm running the course, even when I'm coordinating, I've got no recourse. I've got nowhere to go. I don't get to go to plagiarism board.
And that's really tough, I think, especially where we have casuals who are coordinators. And I've heard lots of stories of where a casual thinks something is happening. They've raised it with the coordinator. The coordinator says, oh, look, yeah, I might have a look at it. But they're not invested in the same way. And that's really disappointing that, you've got to push not only from the top down of, talking to, having DVCs and associate deans, TNL talk to each other about this, but it's also about trying to build that groundswell movement from the bottom up to say, this is a serious issue and we need some support. And for casuals especially, we need to have a clear and identified process by which a casual academic can raise an issue about an assessment task with the coordinator. And if the coordinator says, I'm not dealing with it, this is not a thing I want to worry about, then we need a way for them to safely also say, okay, well, if I need to go around that coordinator, what is my next step? Because we don't talk about it.
I think another burden also, so this is flipping it to the student perspective, is this is a huge burden on individual students. So very much when we're doing a lot more of group work and teams, if you know, and I've been in this situation where I've been creating a PowerPoint with another student. This was a few years ago, my continuing studies in different areas, and realizing these were all cut and paste and going back to that student because we were going to get a whole mark together based on this and saying, you can't do this. Oh, well, it came down to me doing it. Now, I've spoken to other students, and this is undergraduate and postgrad, saying, yeah, basically it's there's enough work to do anyway, but once you realise there's no one, you go to your lecture and it's kind of like it's a group thing, so work this out yourselves.
Sort it out yourselves. That's
yeah, you have
never
really got the recall, and then you end up having to do it all by yourself. So, I mean, if you're in a group of 4 and only one kind of, you raise it, everybody's like, okay, well, fix it, basically.
This is university incentive systems as well, like how universities are managed. And for most academics, they will tell you that their key performance indicator is publications and research output. And I once had a colleague tell me, Amanda, as long as you don't club a baby seal to death in front of all the students and you keep your teaching evaluations above a certain level, you could do anything. We don't mind. And so, you know, if I'm a 40-40-20 balanced academic and I'm feeling the pressure to research, I could totally understand why some people see cheating and go, I just don't have time to deal with this, or I've had a bad experience. And well, if the students cheated in my subject, they'll probably cheat somewhere else and someone else will worry about it. Someone else will catch it. And that comes from not recognizing how important teaching and learning is in our workload and what we do and how to do that well, having structures in place for academic integrity. And, you know, my leader of my academic integrity project at my university is very passionate about this area. And it's really important. We talk about academic integrity when we welcome students to our university. I give it the same amount of time as Respect Now Always and talking about sexual assault on campus and consent. However, the Respect Now Always campaign receives significant dollar funding towards building resources and engaging students. And academic integrity at a lot of universities receives a very small, if any, amount of budget from a central university department to really combat cheating and push strong messages of academic integrity across the cohort.
So what opportunities in this, now that in this, what we're feeling is semi-artificial environment, but could become quite a normal environment. What are the opportunities do you three think are available in an online learning and teaching space that we can advance this?
For us, it's Vivas. Obviously, we have to have remote invigilated exams, but we want to also say to students, if you do an assessment, you could be called to give a 5 or 10 minute online little video chat with the coordinator about this task. We saw this, Professor Peter Scott at my university used to be at the Open University, and they had some significant issues with cheating in an engineering subject, I think. And all they did was add the line that said, you may be called for a 5-minute Viva. And they started randomly calling maybe 1 in 10 students. And that really made students think, oh, I could be called. I don't know when I could be called. I really should know this. And I think a lot of us will know that where we suspect a student has cheated and you talk to them, they don't know anything about the subject. They can't tell you about their assignment or what they've written, what it means. And I think for us, it also means just thinking of different ways of confirming that the student who did the work is actually the one who's enrolled. That's one thing we're looking at. And for us, I think moving forward, the big key is how do we keep educating in this online environment and how do we walk the talk as well? That's really important. For me, everything that I have in a slide is always properly referenced. Images, even if I don't need to reference them, I'll always include all that information to show them that this is important to me. And then also to set aside time. A lot of academics will say, oh, look, we don't have time in class to teach them proper referencing. I'll just send them to a website. And it's about then thinking about, do we want them to have knowledge or do we want them to have skill? And so for me, skill wins out most of the time. And so I will leave chunks of knowledge out because I know that they can obtain that online, and I will focus on skill. But that's a big shift for a lot of academics who come in as content specialists, and they're not skill specialists. They're not skilled in teaching academic writing or teaching appropriate referencing or teaching how to work in a group. They're like, students will figure that out. And I think that's something that in this environment of online, we need to consider better how we deliver that skill delivery and that skill process of improving that.
Yeah, I know when I'm starting to talk about learning design and learning outcomes, it is start framing it, your question as at the end of this subject, rather than focus on students should, cut it back and begin with the focus on each student, each successful student, and successful completion of this course by each student. Each student will be able to do what? To do knowledge, to do understanding, it's very hard to fit that into a sentence. What will they actively be able to do with what they've acquired from that course? Jenny, you've had your hand up, sorry.
So one of the things that I started doing very early on in my teaching career, it goes back to what Amanda was saying about skills, is that at the beginning of every single one of my lessons, whether it's in face or even digital, and it's actually easier digital, is I do mini skills lessons. So today I've just been teaching the first 5 to 6 minutes of every toot is aimed at teaching them the skills to be successful. So today was literally teaching them how to do a footnote and how to do a proper footnote and the things not to do to annoy me. So when you're doing a footnote, so don't do 1 and 2 together because that's now 12. So I did that really early on, and in the digital space, I think it actually lends itself to that better because a lot of the professors will send for footnoting in particular, will send them to the library website. I'll go look at, Recite. Well, do you know what? Recite's wrong half the time. It drives me mental. So teaching them those skills, and then I upload a document now that has, some references and some footnotes and some examples, and I can answer questions a little bit better in the digital space. So they were more free in asking questions because they could type it privately in the chat instead of looking stupid in front of the whole class.
That's really silly. In terms, you're giving feed forward. So you're not giving feedback once the assignment's in and what they could have done to improve, and maybe they'll do it next time if they actually read the remarks you've made on the assignment. You're giving feed forward so they can actively, if they acquire this skill, bang, they can start applying it to improve and improve their grade with whatever the assessment is that they're going in and doing.
And I think that use of exemplars is really, really powerful.
What's really important about this is that half of my students in history always are breadth. So these are, students in a second and third year history course who come in thinking, oh, history is a bit easy, bit of reading, bit of writing, and have never done, they don't even, they've never done a footnote or, some of the other things I do is what is a primary source and how the heck do you find it, and following the footnotes. And I do a fake museum exhibit. I make them put a museum exhibit together to get their hands on some cultural, that's going to be harder in a digital space to do, but I'm working out how to bloody do it because it's powerful. We do imaginative games. And I think that it's funny because I've been doing this for years. And half my students hate it because they think I'm spoon feeding. Half my students love it, which means I'm doing it right. 50-50 is perfect. But I do find on the flip side, as a casual, none of my academic mates they all think it's a bit stupid that I do this.
Yeah, well, I am, I guess, on the frontier in my department as well. And so often when I first started making video 10 years ago, it was like, why on earth would you ever want to make a video of a complex concept and give it to students for revision. Like, surely you just want them to ask the question in class. I'm like, well, students might be shy, they might not want to seem silly in front of anyone else, they've got work commitments. I think that for those of us who are shifting how we think about teaching and learning, a lot of that, it comes from we're thinking about students first. We're not thinking about us first. I've just implemented an assessment task that has 3 different options of what to do due at 3 different times. It's all communication skills, but 3 very different tasks. And a common issue from my colleagues was, oh, that seems hard to make 3 tasks comparable. Like, well, they all use the same marking rubric. They all have their own advantages and disadvantages. Oh, surely that would be more marking. I'm like, actually, it's the same amount of marking just spread out over a longer period of time. That's actually better for my casuals than asking them to mark like huge slabs of 400 assessments in
And what I'm hearing
2 weekends.
Also, this is, even if it's not up, if Jenny, you're getting the others who are permanent or have got fixed term contracts going, why would you? This is all about your working life. And if it's helping your working life, and your working life means inside, outside work, it's working. It's great for your students as well. So that's the added bonus, but it's making your working life manageable.
Yep.
The other thing I also do in regards to ethics and cheating and plagiarism type of things is that I do this more when I'm coordinating. When I set questions, it's impossible to answer the question I've asked. What they have to do is they have to narrow the question I've asked. So I run a race class. So one of the things I will ask is the experience of one Native American group. Okay, they have to choose a date range, a place, and a Native group. No 2 students are going to choose the same of those 3 items. And it means that even in a class of 200, I will have 200 completely different essays. They're all under that big banner, but because they've all narrowed in a different way, there is no way that they can cheat.
Well, I won't say there's no way, but you're designing
it
in a way that would incentivize them to do their own work. So,
yeah, you're basically increasing the risk of detection, right? And they should realize that, well, if 2 of us pick exactly the same thing and then it looks awfully similar, we're pretty thin ground, so better choose something else and do my own work.
Yeah. Okay, I'm looking at the time. I'm trying to keep this into the hour.
So I have a little one who's like at the door. He's like, is it time yet?
It's silly time. Yes, don't worry. It's my time to move out of the lounge room back into my tiny little space back into the bedroom. So this is my time as well. So I'm going to cut us off. I'm really appreciative, Amanda, of you coming in, and of Derick co-hosting today and tomorrow. Thanks for dropping in, Jenny. Could I just get you to, Amanda, give me at least one quick tip about video production, or something about if you're going to give it a try with creating your first video that's not kind of a Zoom one or a lecture capture or recording of a lecture or something like that. What would you suggest?
Be authentic. Be yourself. That's the only thing. If they can, the audience connects with a particular person, not with the content. So being you and being your authentic self, even if that means dog barking, kids coming in, sitting in your tiny room, wherever it might be, being authentic is the number one thing.
Fantastic. Do you mind if I wrap it up here from the virtual Cuppa for today? We'll say goodbye to you all. We're coming back tomorrow, same time, same place, and it will be Thursday, I think tomorrow, yes, and we'll see Derick again. And we've got Dr. Molly Dollinger coming in tomorrow, who will be talking about student success. And
she is awesome.
In an online environment.
I love Molly. She is fantastic. So you're in for a real treat.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to say goodbye, everybody, from the virtual Cuppa and Alison. Creed, I'll be back tomorrow to host.